In a culture that tells us we can choose motherhood or, Good Counsel knows we're meant for motherhood and. Hi, I'm Samantha Elbertson. I work on behalf of the maternity home Good Counsel. We have 4 homes in New York and New Jersey where motherhood is rescued, preserved, and celebrated every day. Welcome to our podcast, Motherhood and, where we spend time talking with women living out their vocation of motherhood and their roles in the community. We speak to pro-life activists, contributors to Catholic culture, entrepreneurs, great legal minds, gentle, humble hearts, those who work on behalf of women in need, breaking cycles of poverty, abuse, and homelessness, and mothers working every day to form and nourish a new generation. This is Motherhood and. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Melissa Ohden, founder and CEO of the Abortion Survivors Network. She's a wife and mother of 2 lovely girls. Hi, Melissa. I'm so glad to chat with you today.
Thanks for having me.
So let's get started. Would you like to tell us a bit about your background and why you first got involved in pro-life work?
Yeah, I love that your podcast is Motherhood and, because we still live in a culture that wants to somehow tell women that this is an either or situation. You can be a mom and have a career, or be a mom and have education if certain conditions are met. And I always like to tell people, this being pro-life for me is not being either for women or for children. It's not an either or, it's a both and situation. Mm-hmm. And so I am a wife and mother first, but without life first and foremost, I never would have been able to live out this vocation as a wife and a mother, and then have a separate life vocation in terms of my involvement in the pro-life world. So kudos to you on the title of your podcast. If people don't know me, sometimes they'll hear my name and go, I feel like I've heard her name before. I am a wife, a mother, a clinical social worker, and also someone who survived an abortion. And so not as the woman who experienced an abortion, but literally the baby who survived my own abortion. And that tends to raise a couple of eyebrows. And the reality is babies survive abortions. We survived before Roe. We survived during Roe, and babies are still surviving after Roe versus Wade was overturned. And I think that's an important thing for our culture to understand, because it reminds us of the humanity of every person, born and preborn. And again, this is not an either or situation. I want the world to see both my birth mother and I had equal dignity and value. We are a relatively new nonprofit. I've been involved in the pro-life world since about 2007. And, when I got involved in the pro-life movement, it wasn't without a lot of prayer. And really, at that time, looking for somebody who would believe my story. I mean, that sounds crazy to say at this point,
right?
Because that's part of the work that I do, is coming alongside survivors so they know that they are believed and valued and upheld. And the same for women who are experiencing these abortions that fail, or they stop them, or they reverse them. But really, back then, there wasn't a lot of talk. You would see us talked about in the media from time to time, policy, they would talk about born alive legislation, but they weren't saying, hey, there's a place where you can go to talk to other people who have experienced this. There wasn't any kind of indication that anybody knew what kind of numbers there were, right? It's a very, historically, a very lonely existence. And the only way you got involved in the pro-life movement is if you became a speaker.
Right.
Right. Again, this is really interesting to talk about from a historical context to see how far we've come. And so that's really how the Abortion Survivors Network came to be. I left my career as a clinical social worker, really took a leap of faith, and God was so clear with me of what he was calling me to do. But I think maybe like some of your listeners, there were moments where I knew God was calling me to start the Abortion Survivors Network. And I was kind of going, hey, thank you. Thank you for my life. thank you for this calling. But could you help me find the people to do all of those things that you're leading me to?
Right.
Because right? I mean, we all do that nervous giggle of like,
Absolutely. Me? Really? Me?
are you
Okay.
sure?
You're gonna have to walk me through this one.
Exactly. And I'm a convert to the church, and my prayers have been really interesting over the years, because sometimes I'll say, like, Lord, get out the 2x4 and smack me over the head,
Right.
because
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to listen. Right? I don't want to see. And boy, that 2x4 can
Mm-hmm.
really get you. But I'm grateful for those moments, because I got involved in the pro-life movement. That the only lane back then was a speaker. And it's been interesting because I became a very effective communicator. I mean, that was part of my background as a teacher and as a social worker. I did a lot of outreach, but I never
Mm-hmm.
thought I was someone who would take the world stage and even go before Congress. And again, I share that as an encouragement, not only to say you can have motherhood and all of these things,
Mm-hmm.
but you can also start in one place with your vocation and let the Lord lead you to a place that you never even knew you could fill.
Absolutely. You almost look back sometimes and think, oh, that's what all that random stuff, it all kind of came together over here.
Absolutely. And how sad, isn't it? It's so sad, Samantha, that we live in a world that in many ways has shortchanged women
Mm,
to say, you can do one or the other. You can't have both. And how many times have women then missed out on everything that comes from that natural flow?
right. I mean, there's conversations, and they've been happening for a long time. It's not new, but amongst women to say, hey, the skills that we've mastered as far as managing a household, balancing budgets, being resourceful, managing people who are temperamental, we'll say, I mean, those are life skills. So to dismiss them and say it's just motherhood, and now get back to real work, or you don't have qualifications, but it's almost like crash course. Here are new people, you get to form them, help them thrive. And I mean, a board meeting or anything else like that seems like cake afterwards. So yeah, no, we've been dismissed and shortchanged
Right.
for way too long.
Well, and it's this cycle of, motherhood is very empowering to me. I mean,
Yes.
even the process of giving birth, I remember
Oh,
my first delivery was so long and awful. And I was seconds away from a C-section after I
wow.
don't even know how many hours of active labor. It was long and arduous.
Intense.
But I remember even after all of that exhaustion, I kind of like took a look around. I went, oh yeah, I want to do that again. Sign me up. Uh, because there is some power there.
I mean, we are invited to take part in creation with our creator.
Yep.
And we act like that's no big deal, or we want to numb it somehow. And I don't want to alienate anyone who has had, I mean, I've had C-sections. I don't want to, but it again, just not to be dismissed, not to
Right.
be minimized.
The entire process of, no matter how that baby is delivered, right? The entire
Yeah.
process of
It's
creating another human being
wow.
and coming face to face with them, and then being able to help form them. And that is that, I think of it as this process of all of those things have made me who I am. And I can't look at that kind of like flow of life and think, wow, who would I be if I wasn't a mom?
Right.
I wouldn't be who I am as a leader of an organization. I just wouldn't. All of those things have come together. And I just want women to be encouraged by that and not see that
Absolutely.
as a burden.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's so many parameters that society, media, whatever you want to call it, puts on us. Age-wise, if you're going to be a mother after this point, it's too old. If you're too young, if you're this scenario, this circumstance. And we really just, in the most general terms, need to trust God's plan we need to get out of the way. right? That's my most constant prayer. Like, okay, I'm going to sit down. You gave me this. Help me take care of it for a minute because I'm getting in the way. Getting to look back is really a blessing to
And
watch how it all
I
goes
think it's
together.
easy, and I'm sure listeners are probably thinking that of like, okay, ladies, that's easy to say when things are going well.
Hindsight, right?
And that is true. But I think that is for me the epitome of faith is
Yeah,
trusting in and seeing God even when things aren't smooth, don't
right,
go to plan. My life is a miracle, but at the same time, I live the most normal life as everybody else
right.
with suffering and trials and difficulties. And I think I've seen God more in those moments that are so dark
Mm-hmm.
than I do in the moments that are full of light.
100%, 100%. He knows how good submission to him is. He knows how much easier of a time we'll have. Yet we have to learn from the struggle. But he's it's almost like he wants to bring us to those places where we go, okay, I forget everything I said. You know best. Just like parents, we don't want to see our kids struggle, but we know the good that can come from it because if it just comes easy versus them seeing the failure and rising from it, we just know how much more effective it is and the staying power that a lesson will have. So yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, I guess all that to say, that's what led to the Abortion Survivors Network is that whole combination of joy and struggle and getting involved in the pro-life movement, first as a speaker and getting to come alongside maternity homes and pregnancy centers and pro-life organizations and primarily back then starting to fundraise, share my story in
Mhm.
an attempt to help raise funds, which I'm still super passionate about.
Yes.
But everywhere I went, I would hear stories that deeply impacted me. And that's what added to my prayer of, wow, Lord, somebody needs to do something for survivors like me, for women like my biological mother. And at the same time, and I think people can relate to this as well, we get involved in our vocation and we're walking it out and life isn't done, right? We're still experiencing maybe, adopting, parenting, the loss of family members, the journey of finding biological family members, all of those
Right.
things, tragedies in the world. And that is also what I was walking out is, becoming a mother for the first time, losing a child in a miscarriage, having my last child who was born with significant health issues. At the same time, going on a journey looking for my biological parents, being united with some of them,
Mm.
learning terrible dark secrets, grappling with that, and all the while still living out my vocation in a very public way. And that is not easy. I'm not going to say I've done it perfectly, but all of those things are part of life and also then led to me really praying that prayer in 2019 after years of advocacy and fundraising and writing my first book and working on a second and really just praying to God and saying, you know what, I know I've been praying for somebody to do something for my population. I do everything I possibly can, but what I do is not enough right now. The numbers are too great.
Mm.
I'm at the end of myself. I mean, really, that was my 2019 prayer is like either somebody's got to do this or I have to be done because I am at the end of myself. And that is to me the most beautiful prayer because where I end, that's where he always has been. And so,
Yes.
yeah, we have grown rapidly. I don't think people even really recognize that there was never an organization that served abortion survivors and women experiencing failed and stopped and reversed abortions. There was nothing in the pro-life movement. Great folks like Human Life International did some meetups years ago. You see some organizations like Live Action talking about survivors. You see us talked about from a policy standpoint, but there was never anybody to say, hey, how you doing? Like, do you
Mm.
need some
Mhm.
healing support? Create healing support, establish community, train people on how to communicate. There was never anything serving women who are going through those abortions that are failing. allowing them to have relationships with other women who are going through it or have.
Wow.
I mean, for me, that's the part where I kind of go, oh my gosh, Lord, really?
Yeah.
This is why you never let me completely walk away, right? As I was praying and saying, Lord, send someone. And you were like, no, just hold on. Just hold on. I'm going to
Building
wait for
you
you to
up.
figure this out. Catch up, Melissa. Um, and that's been the beauty of it, is we've now connected with nearly 675 survivors from, about 25 different countries. It's so hard for me to even keep the numbers up to date. We hear from people almost every single day. We have come alongside survivors and served them with a specialized healing curriculum that I wrote. There's that clinical social work degree.
Yeah.
That I never intended to get in the first place years ago. God has
God
used
is good.
everything. We also launched a speakers training, which we just relaunched that as well. So it's supportive to anybody, however they want to share their story. I think one of the hurdles for anybody, and I think including probably the women that you all serve as well, is if we don't see people with our experience in community, if we don't see them using their stories in whatever way is their particular vocation, right? Whatever is safe and comfortable and fits with their life. I think that sometimes there is this perception that everybody is supposed to be a speaker.
Oh.
Right? Well, isn't that what I'm supposed to do? And
Right.
bless everybody in the pro-life movement. We have meant well, but if I was paid $1 for every time somebody said, well, all of you abortion survivors should be sharing your story, my budget would be met, right? I mean,
Right.
because people understand the importance of having such a powerful story that highlights the humanity of every preborn child. But at the same time, they don't understand the trauma of surviving an abortion, of being the woman who experiences that failing or stopping it or reversing it. And understanding, right, that not everybody is called to share their story on a public platform.
Right.
So we've really tried to create a model about sharing your personal story and maintaining your emotional health and well-being. And so that is a training we now have. We share lots of practical tips. We are building out a sustainable model that allows those adult survivors to go through healing, be trained in speaking, and then do something with it. So we'll be launching advocates and then an upper tier called ambassadors, which is an even higher level of mentoring. And you will see them at more conferences and things like that, trying to balance out. So survivors and mothers, as we continue to grow, can see, man, I can be an advocate in my area, live my life, right? Have my whatever my vocation is, and still make a difference. I don't have to grab a microphone and do something that maybe I don't want to do, or maybe isn't emotionally safe and healthy for me. But if I do, then I could also be this ambassador, which means I might take the mic every once in a while. Cool. So we've worked really diligently to build out those programs. And at the same time, we have an online community that reaches around the world. So if anybody listening is a survivor or knows a survivor, we do community Zooms. We have a platform that people are talking to each other every day on social media, our own social media. We also do a lot of advocacy and awareness. We're going to be launching a whole month of awareness this fall, where we're going to really amplify the fact that babies survive abortions in a culture that has tried to muffle.
Yeah, absolutely.
And now we've also added in a lot of family support. So we have support groups that run for women who have experienced their abortion failing, or they've stopped it or reversed it. So those moms can get together and have that community that's been missing in the pro-life movement. We also have separate support groups for adoptive parents, so they can go through that as well, because there's lots of questions, not just like, how does this happen and how often does it happen, but what do I look out for with my child? What can I expect?
Right.
And Do I share their story with them? How do I do it? How do we deal with that as a family? What do we look out for after that? So there's so many questions that we've never even really dealt with, again, in the pro-life movement as a whole, and nobody else probably could have seen it but me. But, as much as I was not prepared for this ever being my vocation, I can't imagine doing anything else but this.
I thought maybe you could explain a little bit about you've grown since 2019 as well. And then with the reversal of the Roe and Dobbs decisions, are you seeing another kind of level up expansion? Are you seeing things shift in a different way? If you could maybe tell us about that.
Yeah, that's a great question about, where are we at post Roe and post Dobbs? It's so interesting because I I think a lot of the messaging was so fear-mongering from the abortion industry. And again, none of that is surprising. This is
Right.
50 years of messaging on their part that the sky is falling and that women are not enough. And I think it's interesting to even think about it from the perspective for you all, because you have been there and you continue to be there. And that is a message that should be getting out there, that
Right.
women need to know that the sky is not falling.
Right. Absolutely.
There has always
Absolutely.
been help. There still is help. And our movement is the one who is committed to
Hmm.
ensuring that women are cared for, and children and families. And that's kind of
Absolutely.
where we're at as well. I think the other side, first of all, likes to say like that abortion survivors don't exist. And if we do, there's like one of us. I've been called irrelevant, that I need to
Hmm.
shut up, all of those things. I mean, that's talk about some victim blaming that happens in
Wow.
culture. Um, but I think the other side would lead you to believe that because chemical abortions are the primary method of abortion right now, that somehow the Abortion Survivors Network doesn't need to exist because it doesn't happen anymore. And I can tell you, first of all, I've got over 50 years of cleanup work to do
Right.
to reach those babies who survived before Roe and during Roe, and the mothers and the families who were just beginning to touch the tip of the iceberg on. But at the same time, we also know that babies survive chemical abortions. We are still trying to get the most accurate data. And we know that not all states even report out their number of abortions performed. We know we can't get a good grasp yet on the number of chemical abortions that are performed. And when we don't know those things, it can't tell us exactly how many survive chemical abortions. But I can tell you that when we've come through data, we see a kind of a typical number being like a 4% failure rate, and as high as 23% in one report. They were indicating 23% failure rate of chemical
Wow.
abortions. Now, what your listeners need to understand is, say, even when you're reading through a state report that talks about complications of abortion, when they talk about a failed abortion, what they're talking about is a baby who survived the first attempt to abort them. What we know is that the treatment of a failed abortion is yet another abortion.
Hmm.
So you can read that in research. You can, if you go to YouTube, you'll see the videos of doctors saying, right, if your chemical abortion fails, you should have another abortion. And that's what we've experienced post Roe, post Dobbs in a big way, is more women than ever reaching out to us and saying, I took both chemical abortion pills when I was 2 weeks pregnant. I'm now what I believe is 6 weeks. I've got a doctor's appointment next week. I just need you to tell me, like, what have I done? Is there
Right.
any hope for my baby? There's nobody else that talks about this to tell me what the impact might be on my baby or for my health. What am I going to do?
Right.
And there are so many different versions of that. I mean, from like, I think I'm pregnant to, is I didn't really bleed as much as they said I was going to, or women saying, right, I had an ultrasound at the pregnancy center. I now know I'm still pregnant. My OB has told me I have two choices: go for another chemical or go straight to a surgical abortion. It was hard enough for me the first time. I don't think I can do a second. I sure as heck don't think I can do a third.
Mm.
this is where we are.
The trauma that our society considers to be trauma, the things that we are so preoccupied with offending each other, and there's therapy for it, and then there's this, and nothing
Right.
is beyond me. Nothing for those. I mean, until your organization that they've been just left out, hung to dry, and now it's going to become over the counter.
Right.
Even user error, even the variables, you're not even going to have the guidance necessarily of a doc.
Right. The trauma of women who have a quote unquote successful abortion and are coming face to face with what they were told was nothing significant, the clump of tissue, the product of conception, whatever words the abortion industry wants to use, and they come face to face with a perfectly formed tiny human being. We are contacted a lot by pregnancy centers and other organizations who are saying, what do we do with the body?
Oh, wow.
But yet we live in a world that wants to somehow gaslight this whole experience and say, it's not a big deal. This trauma is not real. You're fine.
And if you make it a big deal, then you're just ruining it for others.
Right. And there
You're
must
just
be
upsetting
something
others.
wrong with you.
Yeah.
Not that there's something inherently wrong with the experience.
Right.
And so for me, as hard as this year has been strategically as an organization to sit down and say, okay, everything we've been doing for 4 years has been so incredibly meaningful and important, and it's filled a gap. The gap is even bigger than what we thought it was, and it's going to remain this way. So what are we going to do as an organization to not only serve adult survivors and provide outreach and education and adoptive parents, but also start serving these women in a much greater way who are experiencing their abortion failing and have questions, and they deserve the truth. They deserve someone to come alongside them and say, man, let me talk to you about your options.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard. This is some of the hardest work I've ever done. And man, I like to think I've done some hard work. But I think like maternity homes and pregnancy centers, we're experiencing what it's like to come alongside women and be there for them, and then sometimes not know what the outcome is.
But Good Counsel has a policy of accepting any women at any point in their pregnancy or just early motherhood, young children, if they need any kind of support, and they're free to go whenever they want, wherever they are within the program. And so you see a lot of women with great success rates, wonderful stories coming back and relying us just even for a familial, a friendship. Hey, my daughter's rising up from preschool. Come to the ceremony that the house managers will go. It's beautiful. Third, fourth birthdays, buying a car, renting a house, whatever. And then you have women who come and decide to leave for whatever reason, and then we lose contact, and you just have to pray and pray and pray and yeah. So to walk alongside them, not knowing the outcome is I would say one of the hardest parts, but maybe even walking alongside them when they're going through the struggle with each of the moms and their children. And we hold the hands of mothers with mental illness, mothers with physical illness, and then if their children have any disabilities or illness or just even are struggling in school, we walk that walk with them. So it's real, right? The work is real. It's not cookie cutter. It's real people and real women. So to assume that there's ABC options and you pick one and you move on your way is so naive and dismissive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that you shared about, getting to just be there with them. And, that's what I often like to tell people when they're saying, oh, what do I do to make a difference? And they can look at sometimes me and our organization and think, wow, like God's just really using you. Well, yeah, he is. I mean, I believe that every day when I'm being obedient. But like God can use each and every one of us. And for me, that's the number one. If you want to make a difference, see people where they're at.
Right. Right.
Who are you passing by every single day? Like, when's the last time you made eye contact with somebody,
Right.
smiled at them, weren't staring at your phone? When's the last time you struck up a conversation with someone in an Uber or the airport or, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
how many times are people missing an opportunity to really know somebody and hear where they are and figure out how they can be there for them? And again, not everybody is going to have all the answers, but boy, I bet they can know where Good Counsel is, that's an option for them. If people know where the nearest, right, where the pregnancy center is, if people know that we
Absolutely.
exist, this is what we do.
If you are looking for what you can do, how to get started, God will use you. As long, if you're out there saying, God, use me, I want to help, he will. He will. But the basic, most important thing that we need people to do is to just say our name.
Mhm.
Just tell people that we exist. Same with you, just to spread the word, because every other organization, whether it's in the abortion industry or whatever industries out there, they have budgets. They have far and away
Big budgets.
more funding to put their name across than we do. And so the best thing we can do is in the grassroots effort, and which is also the most effective way of touching hearts
Mhm.
and changing minds, is to one by one talk to each other. So yeah, you have to smile at people. You never know what kind of conversation you're going to strike up. You never know who you're going to meet. You don't, and again, you're asking for God to help, to use you as a channel. Then those chance encounters are also part of it.
Mhm.
100%. It's I think it's a Mother Teresa. Peace begins with a smile, right?
Mhm.
You can bring peace to the whole world if you just smile at people more.
Mhm.
So we're talking about maternity homes and the lives of women today. I I think things are changing, and I think because of because of the reversal of Roe and the Dobbs decision, that I know at Good Counsel, we are looking to expand. We are looking to just be there, be available for a new influx of women, which is same as the before, but just we're hoping to get the word out more, so that, like you said, women don't feel like they've been cut off with no options just
Mhm.
because maybe an abortion isn't readily available in their state. In fact, now that option is moved out of the way, so you can see all the myriad of beautiful options that there are. So I think that's an important way that maternity homes are shifting. And I think what's wonderful about our pro-life movement, as you've so eloquently described, there's not a lot of us. There are a lot of us, but not by the world's terms, a lot of us doing this work.
Mhm.
There's a lot of speakers, and God bless them, because advocacy, I mean, if people don't know that you're there, you can't do the work. But working together, now that we've gotten to a point where we can link up and we can talk to each other, and you can refer um, full families over to Good Counsel so that they can get the need, and we can refer them to you, and just the networking that's happening, I think is beautiful.
Mhm.
And you know God will work in all of our organizations and bring us all together to make this huge net to catch women who are falling or afraid of falling
Mhm.
into motherhood, which is not a fear.
Right. Well, and in many ways, when you read the media over the last year, certainly we know that there's always a bend to what the media wants to report. And what people need to understand, what your listeners need to understand, is that Good Counsel and maternity homes and pregnancy centers and even organizations like mine, we're needed now more than ever.
Absolutely.
Row falling doesn't mean that the work is finished. It means that the work looks a little bit different. And in many ways, it's
A
more
new
difficult
beginning.
than ever. Um,
Yes.
right? I don't feel like it removed hurdles. I think it added them. But as I tell my kids, every hurdle is an opportunity.
Amen.
So, but yeah, that's what if I could tell people one thing about maternity homes in particular, I would say you're needed now more than ever. And so what are we as a movement doing about that?
Right. One of the goals of the podcast here is to speak to more organizations like yours so that we can say your name and you can say our name, and we have a a team, a united front ready to help anyone who needs us. So that's amazing. So Melissa, before we go, I'd ask if you have some stories to share with us, maybe a high and a low, working with the Abortion Survivors Network.
I think every day I have a high. I mean, really, I don't want that to sound trite, but every single day we hear from somebody who has a story, whether they're a survivor, whether they're a mom. I opened an email today from a family member who was talking about how they had had a failed abortion in their family and now how that had affected their family. And there is just something so humbling
Sure.
that people trust us with their vulnerable stories and their vulnerable selves. So every day, just getting to hear from people and know that they now know they're not alone, whatever that experience is that they're coming into contact with us. So it just every day is a high. But probably every day I have a low as well, if I'm being brutally honest. And I don't think my lows are what people probably expect them to. It wouldn't take much for people to realize, like, I have been ridiculed by the abortion industry more times than I can count, made fun of, right? Told that I'm irrelevant, I mean, you name it, it has happened. Being said that survivors don't exist, we must be lying. I mean, you fill in the blank, there's a lot of that junk. People will do lots of funny things to deny truth, to
Sure.
maintain their cognitive stance on things. So I get it. But my low probably has come this year when we started to hear from more women about their chemical abortions failing. And when I said we don't always know what the outcome is going to be when women reach out to us, that's what we experienced. One of the moms that we were working with had been experiencing her OB actively coercing her to have another abortion. And, I guess I want people to understand as well, when we talk about this as a low and what has happened post Roe and Dobbs, women have more time than ever now to be taking the chemical abortion pill. And certainly when we know that they are allowing it to be given, no matter what state laws are, women who are 30 weeks are receiving it, young boys can get it in the mail. I mean, you name it, it's happening. So there's a longer period of time through which women can have multiple abortions. So like, that's our new mission field, is knowing that the most at-risk abortion survivor is the one who survived the first attempt to abort them. And they are at more risk than ever of a follow-up abortion. Right. So my low comes from seeing that is the situation, because one mom in particular, we worked with her for weeks, knew that she was actively being coerced by OB to have a follow-up abortion after the chemical failed. And, she was making a lot of movement, wasn't following through with the follow-up abortions that were being scheduled for her, was voicing that she could see herself parenting this baby. And then when we got her to the point that she would have been going in for an ultrasound, she stopped communicating. And that's hard for anybody, right? I know it's hard for you guys as maternity homes. It's hard for pregnancy centers. But for somebody like me, right, that baby is me. Yeah. That mom is my biological mom. And when we talk about trauma, that's a place that I know exists within me. And so our team is built in such a way that we can take on those stories and that trauma as it's happening. But it touches me every single day, because that would have been me. Right. Right. And so that's a low for me, not knowing what happened to that baby, that survivor who survived the first attempt to abort them. But at the same time, I do believe that anytime that happens, that child's life is never going to be in vain,
No.
because we serve that mom with love and with truth. And I believe that that will have an impact in her life and in her family. And you know what? At the end of the day, I still have hope, because I don't know what happened, right? I don't know that she went to the next abortion. Maybe
Right.
life is just happening and she got enough from us that she didn't need anymore. I don't know.
Mm.
But I want people to understand, when we get involved in this work, we do it no matter the high or low. There's a lot of
Right.
self-care that has to go into it, self-awareness, teams being built in such a way that we practice self-care, but we take the highs with the lows.
So advocacy coming from a place of experience um, is a special kind of calling or vocation, because it triggers all of your
Mhm.
trauma every moment of your work. I mean, it's all so personal, and I think that's what makes you most effective at reaching people. And so God uses it for good, uses all things for good. And but yeah, that I'm and that you're building this network. You have built this network, and I'm sure you are far and away not the only abortion survivor on your team. So to think that there, so it's very important. And I love hearing that that you're all taking care of each other too, because it's almost too heavy a burden to shoulder alone. The burnout would be, I would think, instant.
The same
So
to be
yeah,
said for maternity homes and pregnancy centers, right? Most of us
absolutely.
enter into this movement because we've had an experience with abortion, or we know how it's impacted our family. And I think that is really important for people to recognize, is we have to know our own motivation for getting involved. And we have to know that that is both kind of a blessing, and I don't want to say curse, but right, that's a double-edged sword of
Right,
why
right.
we feel so passionate, and the boundaries that we have to place in order to be able to carry out that work and stay well.
Absolutely. Because uh, as mothers, especially, there's that vulnerability that we have. What's the phrase, that you're wearing your heart on your
Yeah,
sleeve, right? Your
yeah,
heart just like gets up and walks out
yeah.
in front of you. And so we know, um, I know from my experience, I just have a special, um, there's just in tune with motherhood and children. And so when you see a mother um making a decision that you wouldn't make, there's
Mhm.
also loving her through it. There's also loving her choices and where she is in her life, and knowing that God can forgive anything, and knowing that we have to forgive anything too. And so it pushes you outside of yourself. And
Mhm.
I think there's a lot of healing that can come from that process as well.
Mhm.
Um, but it's not for the faint of heart, as they say. Okay, so thank you again so much, Melissa Ohden, for chatting with me today. I Would you tell us the names of your books?
Absolutely. So
Okay.
my first book is You Carried Me, A Daughter's Memoir. And the second book is entitled Abortion Survivors Break Their Silence. That will be coming out in early January 2024, with focus on the family.
Oh, amazing. Amazing. Okay. And then always, I want to let everyone ask them to please visit the Abortion Survivors Network website to learn more about Melissa and her team and their mission. The website is abortionsurvivors.org, and you can follow Melissa and her mission on Facebook and Instagram. The handle is at the Abortion Survivors Network. Okay. All right. So thank you so much, Melissa. God bless all of your work and you and your family.
And thank you to Good Counsel and your team for everything that you do. Chris knows that I am a big fan. And so when we talk about this of collaborating together, I want folks to know that we mean what we say. that this is genuine, and that hopefully you will be seeing me out your way soon so I can support you guys in person.
Wonderful. Oh, that would be so great. If a woman is pregnant, she shouldn't have to worry about how she's going to carry, deliver, and care for her child. She can call Good Counsel. We need you to help spread the good news that Good Counsel's doors are open for all women pregnant and parenting and in need. Please join us and be an advocate for motherhood. Subscribe to our podcast, Motherhood and, on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Please be sure to visit Good Counsel's website for more information and to get involved at goodcounselhomes.org. We ask that you share our maternity help website, help.goodcounselhomes.org. Please share this website with others often so that it will reach more women in need. Subscribe to Good Counsel's YouTube channel for more inspiring and edifying content about maternity homes, the pro-life movement, and the life and ministry of Good Counsel's founder, Father Benedict Groeschel. And be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Good Counsel Homes. If you have any questions or ideas for future guests or topics, please message us on Facebook or Instagram. Remember, life is love. Talk to you soon.